Manchester City to possibly face relegation. Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. Welcome to another video. Yes, today's video is going to centre around this whole Manchester City story that is ever developing and ever getting ever so much more interesting by the day in regards to what may happen to Manchester City should they be in fact found guilty of all of the 115 charges that the Premier League is throwing at them. According to a lead financial expert, he seemingly suggests that because the charges are in such on a high level, on a more significant level, they are obviously in a much more different stratosphere to the charges that were made against Nottingham Forest and Everton several days ago, that City could be facing major points deductions or even worse, relegation down to at the very least the Championship, or maybe even beyond further down the footballing pyramid. We're going to be talking about that particular part of the story. We're going to be talking about Manchester City, giving my opinion on the entirety of the 115 charges that are currently looming over Manchester City as we speak. But before we go any further, I would like to remind you to please like the video and also subscribe if you're new. Both things always and forever greatly appreciated. And of course, get involved in the comment section down below. I'm sure you have a lot of interesting thoughts, comments, opinions, predictions, feelings, whatever you want to call it. That'll make for great and interesting reading down below yourselves. So do get involved down there. I do encourage you for it. I'm sure it'll all be great. And I can't wait to hear from you all. So do get involved. But without further ado, let's get on with the story. Let's get on with Manchester City. Let's get on with talking about Pep Guardiola's side, Sheikh Mansour's club, whatever you want to call it. So, as we know, for the past few weeks, the Premier League have been showing their teeth with these FFP rulings. They've been clamping down on finding teams that are seemingly found to be guilty of breaching FFP rulings and PSR rulings in particular. Everton and Nottingham Forest found that out the hard way within the past several days or several weeks or so. In Everton's case, of course, having been found guilty of seemingly 2 of them charges, which they are going to both challenge. But in those kinds of situations and stories, everyone's always pointing at this club right here. Everyone's always pointing at this club and going, well, what about them? What about Manchester City? What about City? What about the charges that are already over City's head? What about the 115 charges there? What about this? What about that? Why is it taking so long? Why has nothing been done about City yet? Why are they dragging their heels in this situation? And finally, we now seemingly have somewhat of an answer. Due to confidentiality laws or whatever kind of rubbish the Premier League is throwing out, we don't actually know the specific of this particular date, but what we do know is that seemingly a date has been set for Manchester City. A date has been set in which they will get their day in court, they will get their chance to clear their names, they'll get them a chance to defend themselves, and we will then know and finally see whether or not Manchester City were in fact guilty of breaching all of those charges that the Premier League has thrown at them, or whether or not they are innocent. And obviously we'll have to wait a long time for that. I think it's going to be somewhere in the autumn, at the end of the season, beginning of the next season, something along those lines. That is when the date's been set. Can't confirm it, can't say anything. Can't even tell you if that's genuine or not. I'm just kind of somewhat making that up a little bit. But I also think I've read it somewhere that they're seemingly suggesting somewhere in autumn time is when they are looking to pencil in a date for this particular hearing. And what I've always said on this is that City will get their day in court, but they are innocent until proven guilty. Now, if they are proven guilty, there will have to be huge and severe consequences, the like of which have never been seen in the Premier League before. And a financial expert, I think, even went on TalkSport yesterday to clarify that, and I think sort of agree with that particular viewpoint that he said. They're in a completely different stratosphere to what Nottingham Forest and Everton have faced, and if they're facing points deductions and fines and things, City will have to face much worse, because this is not just a one-off season. This is obviously dating back to the beginning of the takeover. This is obviously dating back to around about 2008 to around about 2014-15, somewhere in that region of time is where they're really looking at. And of course, that was where the major foundations were built to where we are seeing City where they are now. Those are the foundations that were built to where we are now seeing City in their Pep Guardiola era, the form of Premier League champions, the form of treble winners, the form of Champions League winners, the form of a team that is the best on the planet right now in terms of the players that they have, the squad they have, the way the club is run, the manager that they have, and everything else in between. That is obviously where the years that they're looking at are the years where they were being built up, the years where they were rising from the ground up, the foundations that were laid, everything along those lines was where they're looking at, and to say that if that is to be true and if they are to be found guilty of that, then the entirety of the past 10 to 15 years has been a lie. Everything has been a complete fallacy. Everything has been a complete and utter fraudulent era for the Premier League in terms of letting this kind of thing get carried on to where it is. An abomination, an incredible oversight by the Premier League to let it go on for this long, if that is the case. And that is why that leading football expert went on to say that City's punishment could be relegation down to the Championship, or maybe even further than that, depending on how many of the charges stick, depending on the severity of what the charges are, because we know that obviously some of those charges are not going to be majorly significant or majorly on the high priority list. For example, we all make the joke about the grass not being long enough, that kind of thing. So we'll obviously have to wait and see on that one, and obviously I do encourage you also to go and do your own homework on this and research if you obviously like this kind of thing, to obviously get better informed, because you won't find it to be incredibly informed over here and know the ins and outs of it, because I'm not a lawyer, but I'll try my best. But no, the overall arching kind of opinion of me is that they are innocent until proven guilty. Now, I believe that for all walks of life, whether it be rules, restrictions, regulations within things like sport or whatever the case may be, or whether it be in the criminal justice system that we have. Innocent until proven guilty. But in saying that, I can obviously cast my opinion on the things that I've seen and the evidence that is available to me. And from what I've seen, from what I've heard, from what I've researched, and from what I've obviously talked about with people, and they brought in their own ideas and things, it seems like City are guilty of something. Now, how severe that something is, how important that something is, how many of those things are important in terms of 115 charges, how many of them are actually going to stick or not, remains to be seen, of course. But I find it extremely doubtful that the Premier League, an organisation like them, has found enough evidence to suggest that City will be charged with 115 charges for not have at least one of them stick. If City somehow get away with all of them, I would find it extremely difficult to believe if that was obviously going to be the case. Do I think they will all stick? Probably not. I think there are going to be some really technical loopholes and real technical things that I think City can probably get away with in those kinds of things that may obviously skin some of those, for use of a better word, I don't know why I want to skin, but obviously beat some of those charges that are being thrown their way. But do I think they will beat them all? No. Do I think they'll beat some of the significant ones? No. Do I think that City are completely innocent? Absolutely not. And again, from just experience of watching them, and from experience of growing up in obviously the era where City had that takeover, and obviously were going through their transitional period from being a club that was only regionally known to being nationally known, to being worldwide known, globally known. It seemed like a major step up, and a very, very quick step up at that. Now, of course, the takeover put City on the map as it was, but City didn't have the kind of global fan base the likes of your Manchester United, your Liverpools, your Arsenals, your Chelseas were having at that time, because, you know, they were all winning trophies. They were all being parts of Champions League football year in, year out. They were all being parts of winning trophies in England. They were all being parts of being in title contenderships. And they obviously all had incredible history to their name. Manchester City were just a club in Manchester that got completely overshadowed by their fierce rivals, Manchester United. No one really knew who they were outside nationally of England. No one really knew who they were overseas. The takeover put them on the map, but even so, no one really cared. And no one really cared until they started to win trophies. And still until they started to win. Now, I'm not saying that it's completely like you wouldn't be able to find a Man City fan anywhere you went. I'm sure that you would if you back then. I'm sure that you would find maybe a one or two, but they wouldn't have been as frequent. There wouldn't have been as many of them as there would be other fans of other clubs. That's all I'm saying on that particular matter. But at the same time, City was still pouring in the money. They were still pouring in the money from elsewhere. They were still seemingly getting all of these deals in place, these sponsorships, these fans coming in seemingly. And that's why things started to look very suspicious when a team like Manchester City, who had no seemingly global reach before, was starting to get all of these lucrative things, lucrative sponsorships, lucrative deals and all of that kind of stuff into their club at a very early stage during their takeover. That was what baffled me, and that's what baffled a lot of other people to point the finger and go, hang on a minute, something is not right here. Something seems very, very off with this kind of thing. But no one batted an eyelid. No one in power seemingly batted an eyelid until obviously very recently, where some leaks were found, and now we are where we are today. And like I say, in my personal opinion, City are innocent until proven guilty. But at the same time, like I say, from everything that I talked about so far within this video, it does seem fairly dodgy. And like I say, if the Premier League seemingly has enough evidence to throw at Manchester City in the form of 115 charges, if they are to get off scot-free completely, then something needs to be done about the Premier League. There needs to be a big in-house inquiry at the Premier League, because they clearly cannot run their own establishment. How do you let 115 charges slip through your grasp? How do you let this continue for as long as it did would be my first question, but we'll see if they actually get the right result in the end. If not, what happens with City? Is City going to get the punishment that they deserve? Is it going to be substantiated? Is it going to be dealt with in a swift manner, the way that seemingly the Everton case has been, the way the Nottingham Forest case has been? Obviously, time will tell on that one, and time will tell on all the other unanswered questions that are in regards to this ever snowballing story, which is getting more and more interesting by the second, I will admit, and by the day. That we count down to this eventual hearing that we're going to get. Cannot wait for this to all come about. We can finally get to know and understand what the whole ideal is, what the whole purpose was, and if obviously City are in fact found guilty or not of this. Like I say, City will get their day in court. I personally think they're guilty, but at the same time, I'm still holding out for the overall verdict. But yeah, there has to be some serious questions after the Premier League if nothing sticks. And like I say, I'm talking about the major ones here. Like the little ones, yeah, they'll be annoying, I'm sure, and they'll have like their say and everything. But it does obviously raise questions if none of the major and significant ones are to stick, despite the fact that there is a fair amount of evidence seemingly in the public domain right now. But we'll have to obviously, like I say, wait and see on that one. And obviously we'll have to wait and see on the punishment of Manchester City. There is another side to this to be considered as well. And that is, if City do get off scot-free and are found to be innocent in the eyes of the law. And it was actually interesting that the same guy who made the claim that obviously City could get relegated actually went on to say that he probably expects City to get off scot-free, because it would take a monumental amount of evidence, strong evidence, hard evidence, concrete evidence, conclusive evidence to suggest that City were in fact found guilty of all of these charges, and to obviously have concocted this whole entire operation of fast-tracking their momentum, fast-tracking their speed of their process and their transition from being that club that we knew of them and being a mediocre English club to being one of the star powers and big name players, not just in English football but in European and world football as well. He said that it would take a lot of evidence to suggest that is inconclusive in their opinion to obviously throw the book at Manchester City in that case. But it is going to be interesting if they do get away with it, because will people then acknowledge City are completely innocent, or will people still go, yeah, you were found innocent, but I still have my doubts. I still think something dodgy went on. I still think something fishy went on there. I still think there was money slid under the table. I still think there was this, that, the other that was made in those kinds of behind closed doors dealings that made you get off scot-free. Will people actually accept City's innocence if it is proven to be innocent? Of course, my personal opinion, I think City have got a lot more to hide, and I think we're going to get a lot more details as obviously the days count down. I think we're going to get a lot more to come from this story. I think a lot more is going to be unravelled in this particular drama, in my personal opinion. And I'm very much interested and intrigued by this whole entire situation that is playing out before our very eyes. So I'm very intrigued, very interested. But of course, only time will tell on what is going to happen with Manchester City. Only time will tell on what happens with all of this. But the big news coming out from the past couple of days or so is that City could potentially face relegation from a potential guilty verdict if they are found to be in breach of those particular 115 charges that is looming over the club as we speak. Lot to digest, lot to talk about, lot to get into. Those are just the thoughts, comments, opinions, predictions, feelings, whatever you want to call it, of this guy. I want to know what you guys think. What do you make of Manchester City, the 115 charges? And by the way, can I just say, another thing to add on to the early stages of City's transition from the takeover. Do you remember the Robinho story? Do you remember the Robinho story where he basically said he was going to Manchester and he thought he was going to sign for Manchester United, but he ended up signing for Manchester City instead, and he had no idea there was a second club in Manchester? That kind of, to me, I know it happened very, 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 very early on in the early days of City's takeover, but that kind of, to me, sums up why City's dealings and lucrative sponsorship deals and everything else that went along with the early stages of their takeover just seemed very strange to me. It just seemed very strange that outside of England, no one knew who they were. But again, maybe that's just a story that I'm looking too much into at this time, and obviously I'm just using it for a little bit of comical effect as well. So, like I said, those are just thoughts, comments, opinions, predictions, feelings of this guy. I want to know what you guys think. What do you make of all the story, your thoughts, comments, opinions, predictions, feelings, whatever you want to call it in regards to this matter will make for great and interesting reading, I'm sure, down below. Hit the like button on the way if you haven't already. Subscribe if you're new. I want to see more content like this. Both things are always and forever greatly appreciated. And as always, thank you all so much for watching and listening. I've been Fletch. This has been another Fletch Talks video. And I'll see you speak to you all again soon in another video or live stream or whatever it may be. Cheers, guys. Thanks, everyone, for watching. Take care. Have a good rest of your night. And I'll speak to you all again very soon.